House will come to order. The calendar for the day. The first and only bill on the calendar today is Senate File 1646. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 1646, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to transportation, the third engrossment.
I call on the author of the bill, the representative from Hennepin, Representative Smith, to explain the bill. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill is part 1 of our legislature to be compliant with the federal ID. This bill is the Senate language. This bill, the House adopted the Senate language, and it passed that body 63-2. This bill includes the following. It includes a full repeal of planning for Real ID that was passed in 2009. This does not impact the repeal on implementation in any way. This allows the Department of Public Safety the authority to gather information, draft language, create and compile fiscal notes for Tier 1, Tier 2, and also modifications for the applicants that are age 65 years of age and older. This bill includes, upon request, the Commissioner of Public Safety to appear before any legislative committee to testify fully. Lastly, this bill includes a mandate for the Commissioner of Public Safety to seek an extension from the Department of Homeland Security so our fellow residents may use their Minnesota-issued driver's license to access the military bases and federal facilities while the state completes the full planning and implementation of the Real ID Act. Members are asked for your support on this bill so we get on the path for federal compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Smith. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Smith moves to amend Senate File number 1646, the third engrossment as follows, and the amendment is coded A5.
I call on the amendment's author, the member from Hennepin, Representative Smith, to explain the amendment. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. This amendment deals with the date for the Department of Public Security to report back to the legislature with the full analysis that I described earlier. This date of April 14th has the agreement of the governor's office, has the agreement of the Senate, Chief Author Scott Dibble, and also has the agreement of Commissioner of Public Safety. I ask for your support and a green vote on this. Thank you.
Discussion to the Smith amendment. The member from Ramsey, Representative Mariani.
Mr. Chair and members, I think we should support this amendment. You know, quite frankly, this bill was written in such a way that if we had acted today, we would be expecting DPS, the governor, to come back with some pretty complex stuff in under 48 hours. And so I'm glad that we're slowly waking up here about some of the issues that are at stake here. I spoke earlier, I'll speak a little bit later, you know, about private information, data privacy issues. You know, we really should move at a speed where we're comfortable that we're getting the information that we need to get so that we can make good decisions when we wrap up this issue of Real ID. Representative Smith, I support you in your amendment.
Any further discussion to the Smith amendment?
All right, let's go home.
Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend Senate File number 1646, the third engrossment as amended as follows, and the amendment is coded A6.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. My amendment, well, before I get through the amendment, I want to take us back in time a little bit. Before we came into session in March, we had a working group that was established on Real ID. And we met several times and we talked about Real ID. And we talked, and we talked, and we talked. And the bill that's in front of us today, all it does after all that talking is just allows more planning and talking. Now we've been in session for 4 weeks today. 4 weeks of talking. And the amendment that we just adopted on a bipartisan basis recognized the delay in time that has occurred with this short session, recognizing that the best laid plans had to be set aside because originally the report would have to come back on March 31st. We had to change that to April 14th because today is March 29th. What my amendment does is it provides an if-then. If we go to the end of session and we do not pass an implementation bill, then the executive has the authority to begin implementation on Real ID. So, Mr. Speaker, what that does is it provides pressure on this legislature to act. And frankly, after a month of being in session, I think this legislature needs that pressure in order to act. Representative Smith mentioned that what his bill does is it repeals the planning. Now, earlier this winter, we went through a great deal of debate, public debate, about flying and transportation, public transportation. It's already been addressed here about talking about parents being able to visit their children on military bases. And I've heard from constituents with business who have not been able to enter federal facilities. The bill, the Senate file that's in front of us, on Section 3, asks for time to comply. We would ask Homeland Security to recognize that we're planning. The way for Homeland Security to recognize that our IDs are compliant is to have compliant IDs. Back in 2009, when the original prohibition on talking and implementing was passed, we were among several states that had taken that position. Today, we stand with American Samoa, opposed to implementing Real ID. I'm confident that Minnesota can implement Real ID, and I think that my amendment provides the security for Minnesotans to make sure that it happens this session. I think Minnesotans are rightly skeptical on our ability to pass legislation. What this would do is ensure that Real ID gets done now and is implemented in a timely manner. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for a roll call on my amendment.
A roll call being requested. Seeing at least 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the Hansen Amendment.
Sir?
The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it is our job as the representatives of the people of the state of Minnesota to bring forward and enact bills and present them to the governor. Members, this bill and the idea behind it undermines the direct authority of the people in that process and relegates that power directly and concentrates that power directly into the chief executive of the state of Minnesota. This is shirking your duties if you vote for this. You are going to be voting to give up your duties and give your representation. You might as well give your election certificate directly, mail it right to the governor, because that's what this amendment does. Members, please vote no.
Further discussion to the Hansen Amendment. Representative Hansen, the member from Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, for 4 weeks have gone by already. We haven't seen any action. You know, there's an Aesop's fable that the mountain thundered greatly. It rumbled and thundered, labored greatly, and produced a mouse. I'm not sure if we can produce anything other than a mouse here. As I mentioned earlier, the best laid plans of mice and men have already had to be set aside as 4 weeks have gone by. With April 14th is the deadline for the report. There are 5 weeks left. 5 weeks for the legislature to come up with an implementation plan, which it has not been able to come up with through the working groups and has not been able to come up with in 4 weeks. So 5 weeks after we get the report back, when we've got to do a tax bill, a bonding bill, and lots of other bills. I see we've got more bills introduced today. What this does is it would ensure, my amendment, I'd ask for support for my amendment, because it would ensure that we get this done. The folks sent us here to get this done. It puts pressure on us to get this done. And if we don't act during the session, Minnesotans can be assured that Real ID will be implemented.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Uroso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this amendment. Back in 2015, when the federal government was talking about implementing the requirements of when the federal government was talking about implementing the requirements of the Real ID Act, I heard from some people in my district with concerns about how they were going to be able to fly and carry out their business. I also in particular heard from a group of the Benedictine Sisters over in Representative Lilly's district, who only get to travel about once a year to see their family. And they were very concerned that they might not be able to take that trip, and so they took the step of pursuing the enhanced driver's license and discovered that the documentation requirements for that leave some people out, because the sisters are essentially a member of a commune. They don't have, even though there's a really long list of documents, they don't have any of them on one of the lists. So I helped them out with that, and I applied at the same time as they did for the enhanced driver's license. And one of the things we found out was that there were additional expenses that we didn't know about associated with that. So I very eagerly asked to be included on the Real ID working group that convened in January. Now, when that group was announced, I already had a trip plan, and so the first meeting of that group I participated in by phone from the island of Maui, because I wanted to be included in those discussions. So I got up in spite of the time change, and I called in, and I participated in that group. In fact, if there's records of it, I didn't just sit on the phone. I asked some questions. I was really hoping that that group was going to begin to address what kind of questions do we need to ask, what do we need to have answered coming from the legislature to the administration about how we will implement this. And Representative Hansen and I, and Senator Limmer and a couple of other people attempted to raise some of those concerns in that working group. But since then, I've been telling people that what I had to participate on was a non-working group. We had the entire month of January, the entire month of February to start thrashing some of those out. We couldn't make the decisions, we couldn't write the policy because we still had this prohibition in place, but we could have asked the questions. We could have given some direction. We had a joint working group of House and Senate members, but the majority of the people on that group, all they wanted to do, frankly, was dither around. We had the entire month of January, the entire month of March, but as soon as that extension happened, everybody just sits back. We don't have to do this, we got another extension. So now we go, I expected, well, we'll come here and, first week we come back March 8th. I thought March 10th, we'd see a bill and we'd be getting to it. Oh, well, and then we had that thing about whether it should go to civil law, which frankly surprised the heck out of me because I thought the biggest concern was data privacy and they're the ones that handle that. But apparently we didn't have time for that, but we had the whole month of March, as it turns out. And now we still haven't given any direction to the administration about this planning. Not a word, not a whimper, no direction at all. These are the questions that need to be decided. How many tiers of licenses are there going to be? We gave no direction on that. Currently, we have 2 tiers. We have the regular driver's license that's non-compliant and the enhanced driver's license that exceeds the requirements of the Real ID Act. They have to pay extra for, and that some people don't have the documents for. We should be talking about how many tiers. Are we going to keep that enhanced one that lets you go to Mexico and Canada? No direction. Are we going to help people out with the extra fees? No direction. Are we going to roll this thing out in an efficient, timely way that'll be cost effective for the state, for the people, that we won't have to put extra FTEs on in the motor vehicle department? We didn't talk about that. And you know what we're going to do is we're going to stick our head in the sand until we get up to that deadline, and we won't be able to do that. Representative Drazkowski talked about abdicating our authority, but what I'm much more concerned about is we are abdicating our responsibility to take care of this for the people of Minnesota. And so Representative Hansen is giving us an opportunity to make sure that even if we can't get our job done, which sadly we seem to have a great deal of evidence to support, even if we can't get it done, it will get done for the people of Minnesota, who deserve to be able to continue to travel and know that they will be able to. Deserve to be able to continue to visit their children on a military base and have the assurance that they will be able to. That they will be able to continue their jobs that require visiting federal facilities. Currently, you can't go to the national labs unless you bring your passport, if you're a Minnesotan, or you have the enhanced driver's license. You can't go to the military facilities. There's a number of things that people need to do for their jobs. So I'm sad, disappointed that we couldn't accomplish some of those things. We had an opportunity to do it. So if you're worried about people abdicating what they're supposed to do, that happened in January and February when we didn't do any of that work, and it's been happening since the 8th of March when we haven't gotten this done. So I encourage a yes vote on Representative Hansen's amendment.
Further discussion to the Hansen amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I urge a no vote to this amendment. This bill allows us to accomplish this bill with this session, this first bill. If we allow the governor to complete the 2.0 bill for this, we will be usurping the authority of this legislative body and also the Senate. I want to work together with all of you in this room and the Senate in drafting a bill that represents our work and give it to the governor for signature. I respectfully ask for a no vote, a red vote, please.
Further discussion to the Hansen amendment. Seeing none and a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 48 ayes and 78 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There are no more amendments at the desk. Without any further discussion, we'll move to third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 1646, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill on third reading. The representative from Ramsey, Representative Mariani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the record, that wasn't me pounding on the table. So. This back row is rough. That's all I got to say. Members, so there's good and bad here, in my opinion. You know, the good thing is that this bill, as Representative Sanders, I think, shared fairly, allows the state of Minnesota to now have a conversation with the federal government. I think that's appropriate. I think it's especially appropriate given the fact that, you know, quite honestly, the state of Minnesota is being coerced by the federal government by holding, you know, some pretty important things over our heads, like, you know, being able to visit our loved ones on military bases and being able to board airplanes. So I get it, you know, we're big boys and girls here, you know, so we'll do what we need to do so we can at least have a conversation with the federal government and show our good faith effort with them. You know, the bad thing, and I'll just be very, very short, the bad thing is that the bill itself doesn't move us assertively for the non-compliant option. No one in this body has argued against that. No one in the work group argued against that. There were folks on both sides of the aisle, all sorts of political persuasions, who have articulated some common sense thinking about Minnesota carving out a safety valve, if you will, relative to the very different concerns that we all have about this federal takeover of our driver's license. Other states have done precisely that, have created that safety valve, that option off to the side. And members, it doesn't matter whether it was a red state or a blue state. Red states and blue states have done that. So there are lots of folks out there in our shoes, in other states, who are trying to be very diligent about responding to the impressive power of the federal government at the same time that we're representing our constituents. And so the question for me is, why aren't we moving as assertively as those other states, even at this point, even as we're just saying, let's talk with the federal government? You know, some of you I suppose some of you play poker and you know how this goes. You know, if you don't play your strong hand when you got it, you're not going to win. And I just think we're not playing the strongest hand possible. I do look forward to the report coming back as a result of the earlier amendment here and to continue this discussion. But quite frankly, we should be moving much more assertively in terms of that safety valve, that option for us. I will vote for this bill. I think it is right for us to go forward, have this conversation, but I do hope that we circle back sooner than later to answer this much more difficult question. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, members.
Further discussion to the bill. Further discussion to the bill. The member from Hennepin, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. I urge a yes vote on this bill. This bill allows us to get on the plan to be federally compliant for our driver's license. Our citizens need to fly. Our citizens need to go visit loved ones on military bases. And our citizens need to get into federal buildings so they can conduct business. This is the right thing to do. I respectfully urge a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none and hearing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 125 ayes and 2 nays, Senate File 1646, as amended, has passed and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there are no objections, we will take action on these motions first. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries.
Smith moved that House File number 2294, now on the General Register, be re-referred to the Committee on Civil Law and Data Practices.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Smith, to your
Mr.
motion.
Speaker, members of this bill, House File 2294, the Revisor's Office found a technical error on one word, and I ask that it be sent back to Civil Law for that correction and that correction only. Thank you.
Any discussion to the Smith motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Smith motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries.
Green moved that House File number 2590 be recalled from the Committee on State Government Finance and be re-referred to the Mining and Outdoor Recreation Policy. David, is that the division?
The member from Menominee, Representative Green, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House File 2590 apparently does not have to be heard in the Committee on Government Finance, but I would ask that it be re-referred to the Committee on Mining and Outdoor Recreation, and I have spoken with the chair, and he agrees.
Discussion to the Green motion. Seeing none and hearing none, all those in favor of the Green motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries.
Green moved that House File number 2591 be recalled from the Committee on State Government Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Mining and Outdoor Recreational Policy.
I call on the member from Menominee, Representative Green, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over in Menominee, we have a saying, and we can teach you how to pronounce that, but House File 2591 is the same story. It does not have to be heard in the Committee on Government Finance, and I would ask that it be re-referred to the Committee on Mining and Outdoor Recreation.
Discussion to the Green motion. Seeing none and hearing none, all those in favor of the Green motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries.
Wills moved that House File number 2825 be recalled from the Committee on Job Growth and Energy Affordability Policy and Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Commerce and Regulatory Reform.
The member from Dakota, Representative Wills, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House File 2825, we're asking to move it because staff realized that there's no funding tied to the bill, so it doesn't need to be heard in the Jobs Committee, so we're moving it to Commerce.
Discussion to the Wills motion. Seeing none and hearing none, all those in favor of the Wills motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries.
Mack moved that House File number 3370 be recalled from the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform and be re-referred to the Committee on Public Safety and Crime Prevention Policy and Finance.
I call on the member from Dakota, Representative Mack, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill is much more suited for the Public Safety Committee. It doesn't have a need to come to the Health and Human Services Reform Committee, and so that is my motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Discussion to the Wills motion. Seeing none and hearing none, all those in favor of the Wills motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries.
Newberger moves that House File number 3480 be recalled from the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources Policy and Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Job Growth and Energy Affordability Policy and Finance.
I call on the member from Sherburne, Representative Newberger, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, that's the motion there to recall and re-refer House File 3480. We think it should start out in the Job Growth and Energy Affordability Committee and then travel down its path. It has a strong it's best suited there. It's out of respect to the wind industry.
Discussion to the Newberger motion. Seeing none and hearing none, all those in favor of the Newberger motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries.
Fabian moves that House File Number 3484 be recalled from the Committee on Mining and Outdoor Recreation Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources Policy and Finance.
I call on the member from Roseau, Representative Fabian, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House File 3484 has to do with a flood mitigation project going on in Roseau and Kitson County. I've talked to the chairs in both the committees, and they are in favor of this and urge a green vote. Thank you.
Discussion to the Fabian motion. Seeing none and hearing none, all those in favor of the Fabian motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries.
Mariani moves that House File Number 3656 be recalled from the Committee on Civil Law and Data Practices and be re-referred to the Committee on Public Safety and Crime Prevention Policy and Finance.
I call on the member from Ramsey, Representative Mariani, to your motion.
And members, we're spending more time on this than the previous bill, but that's the nature of this session. Mr. Speaker, House File 3656 is an issue dealing with victims of sexual assault and immigration status issues. I spoke with the chair. She's okay with this motion. What arose was original language having to do with the requirement for written or electronic records. I have an amendment. We're going to strip that out. That's my solemn promise. It doesn't need to be in data privacy. So this is the appropriate motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members.
Discussion to the Mariani motion. Seeing none and hearing none, all those in favor of the Mariani motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the motion carries. Announcements. The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Education Innovation Policy Committee, we will reconvene in the basement 20 minutes after we adjourn.
Announcements. The member from Brewer Earth, Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow is Mankato Day at the Capitals, and we hope to see you all at the reception afterwards. Thank you.
Announcements. Announcements. The member from Goodhue, Representative Kelly, to your announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Transportation Committee will meet 15 minutes after we close. Thank you. Room 5. Thank you.
Announcements. The member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
I forgot to mention that the reception will be held in the Senate Office Building atrium. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further announcements. I call on the member from Hennepin, the Majority Leader, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12:15, Wednesday, March 30th, 2016.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12:15, Wednesday, March 30th, 2011. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Representative Pepin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? The House is adjourned until 12:15, Wednesday, March 30th, 2015.